want you to close your eyes for a moment. I want you to imagine that it's 2010, late, maybe 1 a.m., maybe 2. You're alone in your room with your laptop, headphones on, the kind of quiet that only exists when everyone else in the house is asleep and the street outside has gone dark and the only light is the screen in front of you. Someone has sent you a link. The thumbnail is a figure, seated, facing the camera directly. The face is wrong, not blurred the way a glitch blurs something, but deliberately, carefully obscured, like something that does not want to be seen but does want to be watched. You press play. The background is absolute darkness. Not a dark room, absolute darkness. The kind you cannot find accidentally, the kind you construct. The figure does not move, not fidget, not shift, not breathe visibly, just sits. And then the voice starts. I can't play you the actual recording, but I can tell you what it sounded like. It had been processed through software that stripped everything human from it. The warmth, the breath, the tiny imperfections that tell your brain this is a person. What came out the other side was something that had the cadence of speech and the texture of a machine that had learned speech by studying recordings of it. It said, I have killed 16 women. Their bodies are hidden. Law enforcement cannot find me. Law enforcement cannot stop me. I am giving you a chance to find them before I decide to tell you myself. This is not a threat. This is a game. You are already playing it. 37 seconds. Then black. You sit there with your headphones on in the dark and you feel something that takes you a moment to identify because it is not quite like anything you have felt before. It is the feeling of having been addressed, not of having watched something, of having been spoken to, directly, personally, of having been made a participant in something you did not agree to participate in. You are already playing, already, and here is the thing I need you to hold on to for the entire next hour. The person who made that video was never a killer, never murdered anyone, never touched a single one of those 16 women. And it did not matter. Because you believed it. And belief was enough. You need to understand what the internet was in May of 2010 to understand why this worked the way it worked. Facebook had just crossed 400 million users. YouTube was 5 years old. Twitter existed but hadn't yet become the nervous system of public discourse it would become. Smartphones existed, but most people were still on laptops, still on desktops, still sitting in specific places to be online, rather than carrying the internet everywhere they went. And the true crime community in 2010 was something specific. Something that doesn't quite exist the same way anymore, because it's been professionalized and monetized and turned into content. In 2010, it was still largely organic. Forums, message boards, Facebook groups with names like Unsolved, America's Missing and Cold Case Files Community. People who had found each other across geography through shared obsession with cases that the rest of the world had forgotten. These were not morbid people. That's the first thing I need you to understand and remember. They were people who cared. People who had read about a missing woman in a newspaper in 2006 and could not put her down. Could not stop thinking about her family. Could not accept that the case had gone cold and the file had gone in a drawer and the world had moved on. They tracked cases. They corresponded with families. They built timelines. They cross-referenced evidence. They did for free, out of genuine human empathy, work that looked remarkably like what professional investigators did. And they were online, all the time, talking to each other, sharing details, building collective knowledge. Catch Me Killer did not stumble onto this community. He built his video specifically for it, because he had been inside it, watching, learning the language, learning which cases had the most active followers, learning which details would make people stop scrolling and sit forward in their chairs. He had been studying his audience for a long time before he sat down in that darkened room and pressed record. The video appeared on a video sharing platform on a Tuesday. No announcement, no promotion, no post in any forum directing people toward it. It simply appeared the way things appear on the internet, quietly, waiting to be found. Someone found it within hours. That person posted a link in a true crime forum with a single line of context. I don't know what this is, but you need to watch it. By the time most of America was waking up Wednesday morning, the link had been shared enough times that the thread discussing it had over 200 replies. People were watching it on their phones before they got out of bed. People were watching it in their cars and parking lots, headphones in, playing it again. People were watching it at their desks at work with the volume low, leaning toward their screens. 37 seconds, over and over, looking for something they couldn't name. What they were looking for was a reason not to believe it. They weren't finding one. Here is the detail that nobody talks about when they discuss this case. The darkness in the background of that video was not incidental. Darkness in horror is a tool. It is a tool because the human brain does not experience darkness as absence. It experiences darkness as presence, as the potential for something, as the space where the thing you cannot see might be. The person who made that video understood this. The background was constructed, deliberately lit, or rather, deliberately unlit, to create a specific effect. There was no ambient light source, no spill from a window, no gray gradient that would tell your brain this is a dark room. It was flat, absolute black. The kind of black that your brain reads not as a dark room, but as infinite space behind this person. Like they were sitting at the edge of something that went on forever behind them. And the face, the obscured face. The human brain has a specific, deeply wired response to faces. We are built to read them. We read them faster than we read anything else. Faster than words, faster than shapes, faster than movement. We read faces before we consciously know we are reading them. When a face is obscured, when the brain reaches for the face and finds nothing, it does not relax. It intensifies. It works harder. It keeps reaching. For 37 seconds, your brain is reaching for a face that isn't there. And the voice coming out of the speakers is telling you it has killed 16 people. Your brain cannot look away. Your brain cannot stop trying to find the face. That is not an accident. That is architecture. 3 days after the first video, same platform, same account, a new upload, same darkness, same figure, same processed voice. But this time, details. Not vague, not general, specific, case names, geographic references, physical descriptions that corresponded when you cross-referenced them against publicly available records. To real open cases, real missing women, real families who were somewhere, right then, living in the suspended state of not knowing. The forums had been loud since the first video. The thread had been running for 3 days, hundreds of replies, multiple competing theories, the high-energy noise of a community that had found a puzzle and could not put it down. When the second video dropped and the details emerged, the forums went quiet. Not for long, a few minutes maybe. The specific quiet of a room where everyone has just understood the same thing at the same time. Then someone typed, "This person knows things they shouldn't know." And that sentence, 8 words, was the moment this stopped being a disturbing video and became something that required a phone call to law enforcement. I need to stop here. Before we go any further into the investigation, before we talk about what law enforcement found and how the hoax unraveled, I need to tell you about the women, not their names. I am not going to use real names here because these families have already had their grief used as a prop once. I will not do it again. But I need you to understand that these were real women, that they had lives, specific, detailed, irreplaceable lives, before they became case numbers in a database that a stranger would eventually mine for material. One of them loved road trips. Her friends described the way she'd drive with the windows down, regardless of weather, music too loud, one hand on the wheel. She had been saving up for a cross-country trip she never took. One of them was in her second year of nursing school. She kept meticulous notes, color-coded, organized, the notes of someone who understood that precision saved lives. Those notes were still on her desk when her family went to collect her things. One of them had a daughter, 4 years old enough to ask questions that her grandmother, who was raising her now, did not know how to answer. These women were not case files. They were not data points. They were not details to be assembled into a performance. They were people. And someone spent weeks, maybe months, reading everything that had been written about what happened to them, learning the specific language of their disappearances, and used that language to perform having killed them. I want you to hold that, not as context, as the actual horror. One of the cases referenced in the Catch Me Killer videos, I'll call her Anna, had been missing for 3 years when the videos appeared. She had last been seen leaving a gas station on a rural highway in the south. Security camera footage showed her walking out the door, keys in hand, heading toward her car. The footage ended. She reached the parking lot, got in, drove away, and was never seen again. Her car was found 4 days later on a county road 12 miles from the gas station. Engine off, keys in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat, her phone, battery dead, in the cup holder. The door was open. Not broken open, not forced. Open. Like she had gotten out willingly, or had been interrupted in the middle of getting out, or had left in such a hurry that closing the door had not been a priority. The road where the car was found was the kind of road that rural counties have. 2 lanes, no shoulders, trees pressing close on both sides. The kind of road where the trees start 30 feet from the pavement and go back for miles, and you cannot see into them from the road, no matter how long you look. The investigation found nothing, no physical evidence, no witnesses, no activity on her accounts, no record of any communication after she left the gas station. She had driven 12 miles and stepped out of her car into the dark, and the dark had taken her. Her mother had been living with that open car door for 3 years when the Catch Me Killer videos started circulating. 3 years of imagining what happened in the 12 miles between the gas station and the county road. 3 years of that car door open. Anna's mother, I'll call her Ruth, received a call from an investigator in May 2010. The investigator was careful, professional, used language designed to convey seriousness without conveying the specific details that would be most damaging. New information had emerged. They were reviewing it. They would update her as the situation developed. Ruth hung up the phone. She had received calls like this before. In the first year after Anna disappeared, the calls had come regularly. Updates, new leads, case reviews. Over time, they had become less frequent. The silences between calls had grown longer, and the calls themselves had become shorter, and the updates had become less specific, until finally the calls were essentially the investigator's way of saying, We haven't forgotten without having anything to report. This call was different. This call had a weight to it that the recent calls had not had. The investigator's voice had been careful in a way that careful voices are careful when they are covering something. When the information they are not sharing is specific and recent and significant. Ruth sat by the phone for a long time after she hung up. She had spent 3 years building something. Not healing exactly. You do not heal from a missing child, not while the missing part is still true. But building a structure around the wound. Something that let her get up. Something that let her function. The structure was not strong. She knew that. It was the structure of someone who has patched the same damage so many times that the patches have become the wall. The phone call had not broken the wall. It had reminded her of how thin the patches were. She went to her computer. She typed the name she had heard in the investigator's careful voice. The name they had not said directly, but that she had heard underneath the professional language, the way you hear a word spoken in another room. Catch Me Killer. The search results loaded. She found the forum thread. She found the link to the video. She pressed play. She watched the figure in the absolute darkness. She heard the processed voice say, "I have killed 16 women." She watched all 37 seconds. Then she watched it again. She was looking for Anna in it. Looking for some specific detail that would confirm or deny. Looking for the thing the investigator had heard that had made him call. The video gave her nothing and everything simultaneously. Nothing specific. Nothing she could point to and say, "That is about my daughter." But everything in the sense that the video existed, and the investigator had called, and the wall had thin patches, and a man in a dark room had said 16 women, and her daughter was one of the women who was missing. And the math of that was something her brain could not stop doing. She watched it 4 more times. Then she closed the laptop and sat in her kitchen at 11 p.m. and looked at the refrigerator, which had a photo on it held by a magnet. Anna at 20, laughing at something off camera, completely unaware that she was being photographed. And she did not move for a very long time. I want to address something directly. Because when people hear this story, when they find out the whole thing was a hoax, the reaction is often some version of, "How did anyone believe that?" And that reaction makes me angrier than almost anything else about this case. Because it implies that believing was a failure, a stupidity, a lack of critical thinking. It was not. The people who believed Catch Me Killer were not naive. They were not credulous. They were not the kind of people who forward chain emails about dying children. They were federal investigators with years of experience evaluating threats. They were forum members who had spent years developing sophisticated analytical frameworks for exactly this kind of material. They were mothers who had been waiting 3 years for any information about their missing daughters and who had every reason to take seriously any claim that might lead somewhere. They believed because the construction was precise. Because it had been built by someone who understood exactly what signals the human brain uses to assess credibility, and had replicated all of them. Let me show you how. The first element: specificity as authenticity. The human brain reads vague claims as untrustworthy and specific claims as credible. This is usually a good heuristic. Liars tend to stay vague because specificity creates verifiable claims that can be disproven. When someone is specific, our brain infers they are specific because they know. Catch Me Killer was specific. Not randomly specific, carefully specific. Specific in ways that corresponded to real verifiable details about real cases, details that an outside observer could check and find confirmed. What the brain did not do, what it is not built to do automatically, is ask, where did this specific knowledge come from? It asked, "Is this specific knowledge accurate?" Found that it was, and concluded, credible. The source of the knowledge was not examined, only its accuracy. And the accuracy was real because the knowledge came from the same public sources the forum members were using to verify it. The hoax was checking itself with its own material and passing. The second element, the challenge structure. Find them before I decide to tell you myself. This sentence did something neurologically precise. It created a scenario in which inaction had consequences. The human brain, confronted with the possibility of preventing harm through action, cannot comfortably choose inaction. Every person who shared the video, every investigator who pulled a file, every forum member who built a theory, every family member who watched the footage, was responding to that neurological pull. The compulsion to act, to do something, to be the person who found the answer before the killer decided the game was over. The game framing was the cruelest element. This is not a threat. This is a game. You are already playing it. Because it was true. The moment you watched the video, you were inside it. There was no neutral position. Every choice, share it, don't share it, report it, dismiss it, was a move. And knowing you were playing a game you hadn't agreed to play made you more invested in it, not less. Because now, you needed to win. The third element, the audience, marched to selection. This is the piece that demonstrates premeditation more clearly than anything else. Catch Me Killer did not post the video on a general entertainment platform and wait for random viewers. He posted it in a specific ecosystem, the true crime online community, that had specific, predictable characteristics. People who were accustomed to taking disturbing content seriously and looking past discomfort in search of truth. People who had developed genuine emotional investment in specific cases. People who had established relationships with victims' families and felt obligation to those families. People who were organized, methodical, and capable of generating enormous collective analytical effort quickly. He had selected the most capable, most motivated, most emotionally invested possible audience, and then pointed them at their own research. A week after the second video, the forums had been running on almost no sleep, multiple threads, hundreds of contributors, a collective analytical effort that would have been impressive if it had been directed at anything real. The third video was 19 seconds long. Same darkness, same figure, same voice. It said, "You're getting closer. Look at what's been there the whole time." 19 seconds. And those 19 seconds were more destructive than the first two videos combined. Because look at what's been there the whole time was a key that fit every lock simultaneously. Any detail in any case, any thread, any theory, any pin on any map. Everything could now be reinterpreted as the thing that had been there the whole time. The forums erupted. 3 major competing theories within hours, each backed by detailed analysis, each convinced of its own correctness. The signal-to-noise ratio collapsed. Investigators who had been working methodically through genuine technical analysis were now fielding tips at a volume that made meaningful triage nearly impossible. And somewhere, in a quiet room, at a desk, in front of a screen, the person who had made the video was watching all of it, watching the map fill up with pins that were reflections of their own research, watching the theories multiply, watching the forums dedicate thousands of collective hours to a fiction they had been fed piece by piece, watching Ruth watch the video again, and they kept going. I told you at the beginning that this story has no ghosts. That is technically true, but I have spent a long time with this case, and there is a quality to it, a specific frequency. that I can only describe using the language of the paranormal. Not because I am claiming supernatural events occurred, but because some things exist at the boundary of what human experience has developed language for, and the paranormal is the oldest language we have for the boundary. Here is the question I keep asking. The women whose cases were referenced in these videos, Anna and the others, the ones I haven't named, the ones with open car doors and color-coded notes and daughters who ask questions. Those women are somewhere. Not metaphorically, literally, physically. Somewhere. In the ground, or in the water, or in the dark of a place that has not been found. And a stranger spent months reading everything that had been written about them, learning their cases with an intimacy that exceeded what most people outside their families had. Learning the specific details, the last sightings, the physical evidence, the geographic particulars, of what happened to them or what might have happened to them, and then used that learning not to find them, but to perform the having found them. There is something in that act, in the specific intimacy of studying a missing woman's case and then using that study to play act her murder, that operates at a frequency I do not have secular language for. It is not violence. It did not touch the women's cases. It did not move a single piece of real evidence. But it is a kind of violation that feels, to me, like it belongs in the same conversation as the things we call hauntings. A presence where there should be absence. A voice claiming knowledge it has no right to. Something sitting in the darkness, face obscured, speaking about the dead. Anna's case is still open. The car door is still open, in the sense that the investigation has not been closed, in the sense that her mother still lives with the 12 miles. The nursing student's notes are still on her family's shelf. The 4-year-old daughter is older now, old enough that the questions she asks have changed, gotten more specific, more unanswerable. These cases were not solved by Catch Me Killer. They were not advanced. The videos contributed nothing, not a single genuine lead, not a single piece of real information, not a moment of forward movement. What the videos did to these cases was use them, extract the details that had been documented through real investigation, real family pain, real community effort, and repurpose those details as scenery. And then, when the hoax collapsed, leave the cases exactly where they had been. The families had been through the trauma of believing an answer might be coming, and then through the additional trauma of learning the answer had been performed. And then they were back in the not knowing now, with an additional layer of violation on top of it. That is the haunting, not the figure in the video. The families, after, living in the same suspended grief, now knowing that a stranger had studied their suspended grief carefully enough to weaponize it. Federal and state investigators began formal analysis within days of the first law enforcement contacts. I'm going to move through the technical findings quickly because the technical findings are not where the horror lives. They are where the hoax dies. And a hoax dying is satisfying, but it is not scary. The video metadata had been stripped, deliberately and knowledgeably. This was not a casual user. The IP routing ran through a chain of proxies. The vocal processing had been done with professional-grade software. The geographic analysis of speech patterns suggested the American South. Georgia emerged as a focal point. This was someone who had thought carefully about being found. But here is the first crack. The investigators analyzing the clues, not the technical data, the content, the specific case details that had caused the forums to go silent, began asking a different question. Not, where does this lead? But, Where did this come from? They started tracing the details backward, case detail by case detail, building a citation map. And the citation map told a story that landed like a trap door opening under everything. Every single specific detail in the Catch Me Killer videos, every geographic reference, every physical description, every case-adjacent fact that had felt like intimate knowledge, was traceable to a specific public source. Not broadly, specifically. A particular news article from a particular date, a particular entry in an online missing persons database, a particular forum post. In some cases, a post in the very forums that were now working to decode the clues. The forum members had been reverse engineering their own research. For weeks, the most sophisticated amateur true crime analysts online had been treating their own publicly available knowledge as evidence of a killer's intimate guilt. The hoax had used its audience's expertise against them. It had hidden inside the thing they were most confident about. The investigators built a timeline of when the source material had been published. The clustering was clear. Someone had conducted an intensive research sprint, weeks, possibly months, pulling case details from publicly available sources before the videos were made. News articles from 2006, 2007, 2008. Database entries, forum posts, police reports made partially public in the early phases of investigations. They had built a library. And then they had sat in a dark room and read from it, in a processed voice, with their face obscured. And the entire machinery of public fear, the forums, the media, the investigators, the families, had done the rest. The knowledge was not intimate. It was assembled. And the moment investigators understood that, the moment the citation map was complete and every specific detail had been traced back to its public source, the whole construction became visible. Not a monster, a performance. A very careful, very deliberate, very well-researched performance. Built for a specific audience, executed with precision. And the most disturbing question was not how it had been done. It was why. The profile that emerged from the investigation was not a predator. It was something that, in some ways, is harder to understand than a predator. Because predators want something physical. They want control, or they want power over a specific person, or they want to satisfy an impulse that is violent and immediate. What Catch Me Killer wanted was attention, not in the simple, dismissive way that word usually gets used, not the attention of a child throwing a tantrum. Something more specific, more deliberate, the attention of being believed, the specific experience of having thousands of people, including federal investigators, including media organizations, including victims' families, take you seriously, treat you as real, organize their behavior around your existence. The videos were not a crime of opportunity. They were a constructed experience, a designed event. Someone had decided in advance what they wanted to feel and had engineered a situation that would make them feel it. They wanted to be the most significant person in the room. They had made the room the entire internet. And for several weeks in May 2010, they were. Millions of people were thinking about them, watching their videos, analyzing their voice, building theories about their identity. Law enforcement was allocating real federal resources to finding them. They had become, temporarily, the most wanted and most watched person in America. Without doing anything, without touching anyone, without leaving their room. That is not a predator. That is something the forensic psychology literature of 2010 did not have complete language for yet. It has better language now. It calls it a specific kind of malignant, attention-seeking behavior that is enabled and amplified by digital anonymity. It calls the people who do it dangerous, not because they commit physical violence, because they are very good at making other people feel the consequences of violence they never committed. Here is the piece I cannot get past. The person who made those videos knew about the families, not in the vague sense of knowing that missing persons have families. They had read the case files. They had been in the forums. They had seen the posts from family members who followed their loved ones' cases online. They had read the specific, particular, human details of specific grief. They knew Ruth existed, or someone like Ruth. They knew that somewhere there was a mother with a refrigerator photo and 3 years of thin patched wall and an open car door she couldn't stop seeing. And they proceeded anyway. Not despite knowing. Through the knowing, using the knowing. The specific details they chose, the ones that landed most precisely, that caused investigators to make specific calls to specific families, those details were chosen because they were the most affecting, the most likely to trigger the exact response they triggered. The empathy that most humans use to avoid causing harm was, in this person, apparently absent in a way that allowed them to use the precise knowledge of what would cause harm as a targeting system. That absence, that is the thing I keep coming back to in the dark. Not the video, the person behind it, sitting in a quiet room, knowing everything, choosing anyway. Face obscured. Law enforcement released their findings without drama. No press conference, no perp walk, no dramatic revelation. A statement. Careful, controlled, official language. The Catch Me Killer videos were a hoax. No evidence of any murders committed by the video poster existed. All case details used in the videos were drawn from publicly available sources. No undiscovered victims had been located as a result of the investigation. The statement described the operation as, quote, a twisted game carried out by an attention seeker. The statement condemned the emotional harm caused to victims' families. The statement noted the significant investigative resources consumed. And then it said, the investigation into the identity of the video poster was ongoing. Ongoing, not concluded, not resolved. Ongoing. The person who had built Catch Me Killer, who had spent months in quiet research before sitting down in that darkened room, who had watched the forums erupt and the investigators scramble, and Ruth watched the video. That person had not been identified, had not been arrested, had not been publicly named, was still somewhere, unknown. The announcement hit the forums, like a structural collapse. The threads that had been running for weeks, the pin maps, the vocal analysis threads, the 900 post discussions of speech processing software. All of it had been built on a false premise, built from their own research, pointed back at themselves. The forums went through something that was not quite any single emotion. It moved through them the way weather moves. First, the specific quiet of a room where everyone has just understood the same thing. Then the noise of competing reactions, repeating. Then something that settled into a kind of exhausted grief. Some people were angry, specifically, personally angry, at the perpetrator, at the platforms that had hosted the videos, at the media that had amplified the story before verification. Some people were relieved. The complicated relief that feels almost like guilt. Because being relieved there is no serial killer is only possible if you are not Ruth. If you are not the family that needed there to be an answer. And some people were quiet in a way that was different from both. One woman, a forum member who had been following missing persons cases for years, who had been one of the primary builders of the pin map, posted a single message when the announcement came through. She wrote, "We were so focused on solving the puzzle, that we forgot the puzzle pieces were people's daughters. The post sat without reply for over an hour. Then, quietly, one by one. "You're right, you're right, you're right." Ruth received a second call. The investigator told her the videos were not credible. The details referencing Anna's case were pulled from publicly available sources. No new evidence had been uncovered. The investigation into Anna remained open. They hadn't forgotten. She thanked him, hung up, sat in her kitchen with the refrigerator photo in her line of sight. Anna at 20, laughing at something off camera. Ruth had spent 3 weeks believing, underneath every careful, rational thought she'd tried to construct, that an answer was coming. That the not knowing was about to change. That the 3 years of thin-patched wall were about to be replaced by something terrible, probably, but solid. Real. Something she could put her hands on. The not knowing was not changing. Anna's case was not advancing. A stranger had studied her daughter's disappearance with more thoroughness than most people study anything in their lives, had learned the specific language of Anna's absence, and had used that language as costume. And now that stranger was unknown, unidentified, somewhere, possibly right now, in a forum somewhere, building a new spreadsheet. Ruth looked at the photo on the refrigerator for a long time. Then she got up, washed her coffee cup, put it away, got back to the work of the day. Because what else do you do? The person behind Catch Me Killer was never publicly identified. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment. Not as a narrative loose end, not as an unsatisfying conclusion to a mystery that deserved resolution, as a fact about the world you currently live in. The person who built that persona is somewhere right now. They have aged 12 years since May 2010. They are in their 30s, probably, maybe 40s, living a life that looks, from the outside, like a life. They may have done it again. There is no public record of a subsequent incident being attributed to them, but absence of public record is not absence of action. The investigation was ongoing in 2010. There is no public update indicating it was ever concluded. They are unknown. And the internet they built their game for has grown, by orders of magnitude, more capable of hosting exactly what they built. The tools for anonymization are better. The forums are larger. The true crime community has expanded into a multi-billion-dollar content industry with millions of active participants. The audience is bigger. The architecture for the performance has been improved by 12 years of technological development. And the families of missing women are still there, still in the forums, still waiting for answers, still unable, because of who they are, because of how much they love, to dismiss a possible answer without examining it first. The official statement used the word weaponizing, the dangerous precedent of weaponizing true crime for notoriety. In 2010, that sentence was exactly accurate. In retrospect, it was prophetic. Because Catch Me Killer was a proof of concept, the first major demonstration that the specific combination of elements, digital anonymity, true crime community infrastructure, the emotional vulnerability of families, the internet's capacity for rapid amplification, could be assembled into a weapon that caused real psychological damage without any physical act. The playbook has been used since, refined, improved, applied in more targeted ways to more specific victims. The technical sophistication has increased. The anonymization is better. The construction of credibility has gotten more precise, and the target is always the same. Not random people. The people who care most. The people who cannot look away. The people who built the forums and the spreadsheets and the pin maps because they could not put down the cases of women who were gone and needed finding. Their caring is the weapon. Their love is the entry point. And the person sitting in the dark room, face obscured, knows that, has always known that. I need to tell you what I think the real horror of this story is. Not the videos, not the processed voice, not the constructed darkness. The real horror is a question. There is no way, from the outside, to distinguish between Ruth searching online for information about her missing daughter and the person who made those videos, searching online for information about missing daughters to use. They are both in the forums. They are both reading the same case files. They are both spending hours late at night building timelines and cross-referencing details and trying to understand what happened to specific women who disappeared. From the outside, the behavior looks identical. The difference is entirely internal. One of them is doing it because they cannot stop loving someone who is gone. The other is doing it because they cannot stop needing to be believed. And you cannot see that difference from outside. You cannot detect it in a post, in a comment, in a carefully researched contribution to a case thread. You just have to trust. And after Catch Me Killer, after you have watched a stranger spend months learning the language of grief specifically so they could perform it, how do you trust? That is not a rhetorical question. That is what was taken from the true crime community in May 2010 and has never fully been returned. Not certainty, not safety, not even the clean anger of knowing who did it and why. Just the specific, low-frequency, permanent unease of knowing that someone in the room might not be who they appear. That the person reading the same case file you're reading might be doing something with it that you cannot imagine. That love and the performance of love can look identical until the damage is done. We were so focused on solving the puzzle that we forgot the puzzle pieces were people's daughters. If you found this story compelling and want to explore more dark, hidden truths from history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. If you found this story compelling and want to explore more dark, hidden truths from history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.